They called me Kale, a legend in extreme sports. Years of brutal training, countless victories, all built on trust. My teammate Jax was more than a partner, he was family. We shared everything, the pain, the glory. I trusted him implicitly more than anyone. The Apex Games, the pinnacle, globally televised, millions watching. Jax and I were set to dominate. We had trained for this specific course, this exact moment for months. This was our stage. Our legacy, the air crackled with energy. Our final run, the Serpent's Coil maneuver, high risk, high reward, it needed perfect synchronization. Ready, brother? Jax had asked, his voice calm. I nodded, confident. He knew our plan, every precise movement. We had rehearsed it 1,000 times. We launched a single blur of motion. The G-force pressed me into my seat. Every muscle, every instinct perfectly tuned. We were flowing, a single entity. The crowd's roar was a distant hum. This was it, our moment. Then a jolt, not from the course, a micro-adjustment from Jax, a subtle, deliberate shift in his weight a fraction of a second too early. It was tiny, too tiny for anyone else to see, but I felt it, a calculated imbalance. A push, my world inverted, the ground rushed up. Pain exploded in my leg, a white-hot agony, the sickening crunch of metal of bone. I hit hard, tumbling, my vision blurring. The roar of the crowd turned into a deafening silence in my head. I lay there gasping, the pain a living thing. Confusion mixed with the agony. What happened? It wasn't an accident. It couldn't be. My body screamed, but my mind raced, trying to process the impossible. The betrayal, it clicked. Through the haze of pain, I saw him, Jax, landing perfectly. He stood tall, arms raised, basking in the glory. The crowd erupted, celebrating his win. My win, the one he stole. He didn't even glance my way, not once. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, I watched him, the champion, my teammate. A cold, hard truth settled in my gut, that subtle shift, that deliberate push. It wasn't a mistake, it was planned, calculated. He wanted me out. Permanently. The doctors confirmed it later. My leg shattered, career over just like that. The legacy I built, the trust I placed, all destroyed by one cold, greedy act. But as I lay there, broken, a new purpose ignited. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of my reckoning. The hospital room became my world. Every day the same grueling physical therapy. My leg, once a weapon, now felt like dead weight. The pain was a constant companion, a dull ache that flared into searing agony with every forced movement. It was a cruel reminder of what I had lost, what had been taken. Beyond the physical torment, there was the silence. The silence of a career ended. The roar of the crowd, the rush of the wind, the feel of the G-force all gone, my identity shattered. I was Kale, the legendary athlete, but now I was just a broken man in a hospital bed. The psychological weight was crushing. Then he appeared on the screen, Jax, my former teammate. He was everywhere, magazine covers, news interviews, endorsement deals. His face beaming with a smile that felt like a punch to my gut. He was basking in the glory, the fame, the wealth. All of it built on my pain, on my broken career. I watched one interview, my jaw tight. The reporter asked about the incident. Jax looked somber, then sighed. Kale is a great athlete, he said, but sometimes in the heat of the moment, ambition can push limits too far. It was a reckless move on his part. Reckless, my blood ran cold. He was twisting the narrative, subtly shifting the blame onto me. His words echoed in my mind. Reckless. Every night I replayed them. That precise moment, the micro-adjustment, it wasn't reckless on my part. It was a calculated action on his. The more I thought, the more the pieces clicked into place, forming a chilling picture of deliberate betrayal, not an accident. Weeks passed. I started attending team meetings, still on crutches, trying to feel normal, but the whispers followed me. He always pushed too hard, one said. Overconfident, some would say, another murmured. They didn't know I could hear. They thought I was out of it. The seeds of doubt Jax had planted were growing, poisoning my legacy. The despair was still there, a heavy cloak. But beneath it, something else was stirring, a cold, hard resolve. Every whisper, every dismissive glance, every article painting me as reckless fueled it. They thought I was broken. They thought I was done. They were wrong. This wasn't just about my career anymore. It was about my name, my honor, and the truth. I started with the footage. Hours upon hours of it. Not just the Apex Games, but our training runs, our old competitions. I needed to see it to prove what my gut already knew. Every angle, every frame, every single second. My strategic mind, honed by years of competition, was now focused on a new kind of hunt. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. A micro shift in weight, a fraction of a second too early, just as I suspected. I found it in slow motion, from a rarely used camera angle. A deliberate tiny movement from Jax. It wasn't an accident, it was precise, it was sabotage. The evidence was there, hidden in plain sight. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, yet it brought a strange calm. He didn't just end my career, he tried to erase my integrity. But I had the truth, and armed with the truth, I knew exactly what I had to do. Jax had built his empire on my downfall. It was time for me to dismantle it piece by agonizing piece. This was just the beginning. My truth was a tiny flicker hidden in frames. I started over, ignoring the official reports, the commentators' words. My focus narrowed to Jax, his every movement, every shift. I needed to see what others missed, what I felt in that split second. The video was just one piece. I pulled up our archived training logs, the detailed data from every practice run. Speed, angle, pressure points, G-forces, we meticulously recorded everything. It was a digital map of our shared history and now potentially his crime. Then came the equipment data. Our gear was instrumented, sensors tracking every stress, every torque. I cross-referenced the logs with the video looking for anomalies. A slight calibration change, a worn part, anything that could explain the impossible. I isolated the serpent's coil maneuver, the exact point of impact, frame by frame, sensor reading by sensor reading. My own movements were perfect, just as trained, but Jax's, something was off, a ghost in the machine almost. It wasn't one anomaly, it was a pattern. A tiny, consistent deviation in Jax's weight shift, always at the critical point of the maneuver, too early by milliseconds, too much pressure in one direction. A deviation only I, who had trained with him for years, would recognize as unnatural. The truth slammed into me, cold and precise. It wasn't an accident, it was a calculated adjustment. Jax had deliberately engineered the imbalance, exploiting my implicit trust, knowing I would follow his lead without question. He weaponized our shared ambition. The man I pushed to excel, the one I shared blood and triumphs with, had planned my professional annihilation. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to eliminate me. The thought was terrifying, gut-wrenching. It was a betrayal deeper than any physical pain. The grief that had weighed me down began to transform. It solidified into a hard, remorseless fury, not a hot, blinding rage, but a cold, clear focus. My shattered dreams were replaced by a singular, burning desire for retribution. I saw him on the news again, Jax laughing, holding trophies, signing autographs. The world celebrated him, unaware of the broken man he had left behind. Every smile, every cheer for him felt like a fresh wound, fueling my resolve. He built his empire on my pain. He thought he had won, but he was wrong. I had the truth, and now I had a plan. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This was about a complete public downfall. My legacy would be restored and his would be shattered. My body healed slowly, but my mind raced. The truth about Jax was a cold, precise fire. My focus shifted. No more therapy for recovery. Now it was therapy for vengeance. Every breath was a calculation. I knew this sport, its rules, its players. I knew the weaknesses, the hidden pressures. This knowledge, once my strength, would now be my weapon against Jax. I began mapping out every angle, every vulnerability. I needed eyes and ears, people who knew the system, who felt the same quiet resentment towards the new order. Not many, just a few I could trust implicitly. The network had to be small and silent. My first call was to an old mechanic. He saw things, he heard things. He was loyal to the sport's integrity, not to the new champions. He listened, and in his silence, I knew I had an ally. My small apartment became my command center. Screens, notes, encrypted lines. I was building something, a quiet storm. Every piece of information was carefully logged, every potential move analyzed. Outwardly, I was the broken legend, limping, quiet, accepting my fate. I let them think I was gone, that my spirit was crushed. It was part of the plan, a necessary deception to lower their guard. Jax's sponsors were his lifeblood. They valued image, not integrity. I needed to show them the real Jax slowly, carefully. I began tracing the money, identifying the critical endorsements. I watched his interviews, his public appearances. He was arrogant, overconfident. He made small slips, subtle boasts that revealed his true nature. I noted everyone, every word, every gesture. Every contract, every deal Jax signed had a clause, a vulnerability. I needed to find the hidden weaknesses, the legal traps he might have overlooked. The fine print always tells a story. The pieces were coming together, slowly, meticulously. He built his empire on my fall. Soon he would feel the ground shift beneath his own feet. My patience was a weapon, and the time for its deployment was drawing near. My command center was ready. The first phase of my plan began with a whisper, not a shout but a subtle suggestion planted where it would grow. I targeted the sports media, the gossip columns that fed on rumors and speculation. A carefully crafted anonymous tip, just enough to pique interest, nothing more. The tip highlighted a minor incident from Jax's past, a forgotten disagreement with a sponsor over contract terms. It was small, almost insignificant, but it touched on his financial dealings. Integrity was everything in this world, and any hint of greed could be a poison. I watched the news cycles. A small article appeared, then another. Sources close to the team were quoted, questioning Jax's single-minded focus on endorsements. It wasn't direct accusation, just a subtle shift in tone. The seeds of doubt were being sown quietly, effectively. Old rivalries were next. Jax had stepped on many toes on his way to the top. I reminded a few of his past opponents discreetly about his ruthless ambition. A well-placed comment here, a shared memory there. It started a quiet buzz among the elite sports circles. Jax, as expected, dismissed it. I saw him on a talk show, his smile a little too wide. Just envy, he laughed. People always try to bring down the champion. He thought it was just the usual media scrutiny. He had no idea it was me pulling the strings. But the hits were landing, imperceptibly at first. A slight dip in his social media engagement, a few less enthusiastic comments on his sponsored posts. His public image, once unblemished, now had its first, almost invisible, cracks. The flawless facade was starting to show wear. I watched him from the shadows, invisible, patient. Every small sign of his discomfort, every forced smile, every defensive statement brought a grim satisfaction. He was feeling the pressure even if he didn't know why. He was reacting, and that was exactly what I wanted. This was not a quick strike. It was a strategic campaign, each move carefully planned, each piece of information a tiny chisel against his carefully constructed image. I was chipping away at the foundation, not just the surface. He would not see the whole picture until it was too late. The game had only just begun. And the first blows had landed. He was starting to feel the phantom pains of a reputation slowly eroding. He was confused, maybe annoyed. But soon he would be more than that. He would be cornered. My next moves were already mapped out. The whispers would grow louder. The subtle doubts would become open questions. And then the real evidence would begin to surface. He thought he was untouchable. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The time for whispers was over. I had spent weeks compiling everything. The video analysis, the sensor data, the financial anomalies I'd uncovered. It was all meticulously organized, cross-referenced, and undeniable. I clicked send, dispatching the anonymous packages to a dozen investigative journalists and a few rival sports organizations. The first real blow had landed. Within days, the news cycle began to shift. Not a direct accusation, not yet, but the tone changed. Unconfirmed reports and sources close to the investigation started appearing. The media, always hungry for a scandal, was picking up the scent. I watched, a quiet satisfaction settling in. The bait was taken. My next target was his sponsors. These companies were built on public image, on clean reputations. I crafted specific anonymous tips, linking the emerging rumors to potential financial misconduct and a lack of transparency. I knew what would make them nervous. Money always talks. The corporate world moves slowly, but once it moves, it's relentless. I started seeing subtle signs. Discreet meetings, lawyers suddenly reviewing contracts, PR teams working overtime. They weren't making public statements, but the internal alarm bells were ringing. Jax's lucrative deals were under scrutiny. Next, I planted the seeds of financial anomalies. My old mechanic, a few disgruntled former team staff, they were my conduits. Simple, believable questions phrased as concerns. Did you hear about Jax's new offshore accounts? Is it true he's funneling money through shell corporations, just enough to create a ripple? The most damaging whispers were about performance-enhancing drugs. This was a calculated risk, a heavy accusation. I didn't have direct proof, but I had enough circumstantial evidence to make it plausible to create doubt. My sources spread the concerns about his sudden, explosive performance, his rapid recovery. It was a potent poison. Jax's once unshakable confidence began to crumble. I watched his interviews. His smiles were now forced, his answers defensive. The easy charm he once possessed was replaced by a twitchy arrogance. He was feeling the pressure, the weight of the invisible attacks. He was reacting exactly as I predicted. His inner circle, once so tight, started to shrink. Sponsors, agents, even some of his closest friends began to distance themselves. No one wanted to be associated with a sinking ship. He was becoming isolated, a king without a court. The walls were closing in, public scrutiny intensified. The media wasn't just whispering anymore, they were openly questioning. The headlines grew bolder. Scandal rocks Apex Games champion, sponsors reviewing Jack's contracts amidst allegations. The narrative had completely shifted. He was no longer the golden boy. His empire, built on my pain, visibly began to falter. Endorsement deals were put under review, public appearances canceled. The cracks were no longer invisible, they were gaping. He was cornered, his reputation in tatters. But this was just the beginning of his downfall. The true reckoning was still to come. The final piece was in place. My expert analysis, combining the video evidence with the detailed sensor data, was irrefutable. It showed Jax's deliberate micro-adjustment, the precise moment he weaponized our trust. I even had a recorded conversation, a slip of his tongue confirming his greed. It was all ready. I chose the Apex Games' own media network for the release. They were broadcasting live, the biggest audience possible. The package was sent encrypted to their lead investigative journalist. It was timed for peak viewership just before the main event. Maximum public impact was crucial. The news broke like a shockwave, the broadcast cut to the special report. My analysis, the data, the chilling audio of Jax's confession all laid bare. The commentators were speechless. Then outrage erupted across social media. The public was stunned, then furious. They saw the truth. Jax's immediate response was predictable. He held a hurried press conference denying everything. Fabricated, he spat. A desperate attempt by a bitter, broken man. His voice was shaky, his eyes darting. The confidence I once knew was gone, replaced by raw fear. He knew he was caught. The sponsors moved swiftly. Major brands announced immediate termination of his contracts. Lawsuits for breach of contract, for reputational damage, followed instantly. His image, once golden, was now toxic. The money, his lifeblood, was cut off. His empire was crumbling fast. Official investigations began. The Sports Integrity Committee, then the legal authorities. My evidence was too strong, too precise. The charges mounted: fraud, reckless endangerment, professional misconduct. His name, once synonymous with glory, was now linked only to scandal and crime. I saw him on the news one last time, stripped of his titles, his awards, his wealth. He was alone, ostracized, a pariah. The public, who had once cheered him, now scorned him. His professional life, his identity, was utterly destroyed. My justice was complete. I watched from a distance, unseen, unknown, no grand reveal for me. My honor was reclaimed, not by public fanfare, but by the undeniable truth. The vindication was quiet, a deep, satisfying calm. He thought he had erased me, but he only forged my resolve. My legacy, once tarnished by his lies, was restored. The whispers of reckless were replaced by hero. It wasn't about the sport anymore, not in the same way. It was about integrity, about proving that truth always finds a way, even against the most ruthless ambition. My name was clear. The road to recovery was long, but my spirit was unbroken. My body might have been changed, but my mind, my will, was stronger than ever. The chapter of revenge was closed. A new one of purpose and quiet triumph, was just beginning. I was Kale, and I had prevailed.